Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. I'll add you into the stage, but he doesn't seem to have a
He's just
camera.
a whirly wheel. Just
He is
whirly
just
in. Yep.
a whirly wheel. And that's all he is. Round and round and round he goes.
It's
Where
like
he
one of those,
stops.
like a Ukrainian missile, isn't it?
That's all he is. Round and round. Oh, and we have the echo as well. Where's that coming from?
That was me, I'm afraid. Sorry.
That was you. Oh, look out. They're all arriving now. Good evening, Richard. How are you? I hope you're well.
Hi. Good evening, man.
We'll quickly. Basically, dear viewer, you know now, if Richard Ryan is here, something is going down, and I'm very very thankful that he's able to join us this evening. But let's start. Look, see how cold it is. By the way, hashtag. By the way, let's start by discussing with Bruce how he's got to get stronger latches for his windows and make sure he locks his doors every time he flies his tiny whoop inside now, or is preparing to comply with proposed regulations. What's happening over there? CAA in your house?
Well, after 10 years of inactivity, the Civil Aviation Authority in New Zealand has woken up and thought, we need to revise our drone rules. They're a decade out of date. So they have decided, after looking at the extensive evidence locally and overseas, that there's no way I can be allowed to fly this inside my house with the doors closed, windows latched, and if I'm the only person home, I'm not allowed to fly this inside my house unless I undertake a training course first.
Quite right.
Seriously,
that's
that is it. It's like, excuse me, what are you people smoking at CAA if that's your proposal? It's lunacy. Do they have the right to legislate the airspace inside my house? I don't know, but that's what they plan to do. And this apparently is because they make reference in the document to SMEs, subject matter experts. So they've referred to their subject matter experts who have obviously advised them that this can't be allowed. Well, who the hell are these subject matter experts? I'm going to do a FOIA on that. I want to find out who these people are. What qualifies them to be subject matter experts? I've got over 60 years flying fixed wing. I've got 16 years flying multi-rotors. I know the technology. I know the aerodynamics. I know the physics. I have plenty of experience. Surely I'm a subject matter expert. So why do I need to attend a course that is being obviously probably presented by people who know far less than me? Why do I have to attend and pass a course to fly this in my own damn house in utter safety?
Do you have triple glazing in your house?
No, that's one of the problems. But it is. I have replaced the glass with polycarbonate just in case.
Yeah. Bulletproof glass all around. It's insane, isn't it? It's.
I think it's ridiculous that any flight authority is actually trying to regulate indoors where there is no airspace, because obviously the airspace is important, and obviously if they want to regulate outside, fine, and we know that they do that. But to regulate inside where the airspace does not matter, so you can do whatever the hell you want. You can have a balloon. You can fill the balloon with helium and it can go up in your ceiling and it can be stuck there, but yet you need to have.
But if you've done that, you're plainly not trained, and you're operating that toy balloon in a manner unfit.
I'm legally allowed to juggle chainsaws and fire my air rifle down the hall, but I can't fly this.
I think we've had this battle before. I think we've heard regulators trying to do this in other places, notably Australia. I think there was an argument years ago in America that indoors belongs to the FAA as well. But I don't know.
Well, Civil Aviation has obviously decided that being 10 years behind the rest of the world is not enough. We're going to go for 15 years. We're going to take you back further. We're going to reduce your rights even more. It's, criminal. And they've quoted Canada, because we used to have a 4-kilometre exclusion zone around our helipads, and they're going to reduce that to 2K. So Canada's 1.9. So we'll go a little bit more than Canada. We know, looking at overseas. But they make no difference. This is still regulated like a 15-kilogram optocopter. There's no distinction on the basis of weight, mass, or they're all the same. Anything that flies under 15 kg is all subject to the same regulation. And they have the nerve to say risk-based. I mean, seriously, I just cannot understand how they have the gall to present this with a straight face.
No, but there will be a great risk to your sofa, the cat, your light fittings. I mean, there will be risk.
That balloon as well.
That balloon. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I say again, if you
bursts, you
let
can
it float
start
up to
talking
the
funny.
ceiling,
Yeah.
you're not in control of it. I mean, come
And if it
on.
burst and the
If you
helium
let-
got around it,
if
to change
you-
the pitch of your voice.
But if you let a balloon go up to the ceiling, then you are basically have a balloon that's out of control, and you're not.
But
in
the thing
control of
is, in New Zealand, I can take a helium balloon or a hydrogen balloon, attach a 500-gram steel bar to it, and let it go. That's legal.
Yeah.
That's legal. But this,
I-
in my own living room, no, too dangerous.
Well, funny enough, here they've already started winding in those regulations, or winding up, winding in, making up. I don't know around what you can lift with the balloon, and it's actually quite hard to launch a weather balloon outside of official.
Can you lift the Brazilian tourists because they fall down? That was terrible, wasn't it? What happened
That was
there?
terrible.
Yeah,
It's just a runaway fire of some sort on board. I think. I don't know if they hit wires or anything, but if you saw the inflation,
did you read the thing? They were on the ground when the basket fire occurred.
Mm.
Or they came down. They got down on the ground. The basket fire occurred. Half of them jumped out, so the balloon shot back up again.
They went up. Yeah. The trouble is, there's a thing. Oh, we're going to get technical now. Pressure relief valve mandated by law on the tanks to stop them exploding if they overpressure. But there's a valve that points outwards, and that's the pressure PRV. And so the trouble is, the tanks heat up. If you have a little fire, the tanks heat up, and then you have a huge fire when the PRV goes and sends propane just shooting out. So unless you get hold of it quick, so we always used to. Top tip: if you're going for a ride in a balloon, see if the fuel tanks have got a lever or a turny knob, because the turny knob melts in. Well, also, which way are you going to turn it? All your time you're turning it the right way, wrong way, right way, wrong way. But when it's on fire and you're putting your hand in there, it's a completely different kettle of ball games. But with the lever, down, off, job done. So yeah, only flying balloons with levers on the fuel tanks.
Top tip, eh? Top tip.
Yeah, top tip. That.
How many lives did you save today, Gary?
None. but it is. I don't understand why those aren't absolutely mandatory and no other sort of valve is allowed in a balloon. Well, but it was a big.
If I can't fly this in my living room, I'll start flying hot air balloons in my living room.
You fly hot air balloons in your living room and see how you get on. That'll be very good. That'll be very, very good indeed. Take an awful lot of hot air. That was a terrible accident. There's also, in fact, Philip sent me a video of someone hitting the ground hard and bouncing out as well. That was another one that was doing the rounds last week. But shall we move ourselves? Brass ball valve. Something like I can't remember what those things are from before, but
Gary, just picking out on what Bruce has been referring to, I had a quick look at the regulations as well, and what I found a couple of things that were interesting that certainly piqued my interest was you've got to meet specified conditions before operating aircraft over property without consent of occupier or owner. All right, and they do give a whole piece on right of way, and you've got to give right of way. A remotely piloted aircraft or control line model aircraft has to give right of way to aircraft on the ground and in flight. But what if the aircraft on the ground is completely stationary? Do you still have to give way? How do we define that? I think the other point, just quickly, that I wanted to, which I think is more important, is when they talk about flying over property without the consent of the owner or occupier. You can fly if you've completed a pilot competency course, which I think Bruce has done a few of those of. And you've got a C-class marked drone, or the operation is not conducted over persons. But what it doesn't do, and this is similar to the law in England, is it doesn't define what distance you can fly over a property without consent. of the owner or occupier. I think we're going to start getting to that soon.
Yeah, the wording also is interesting. It's not you must not. It says you should not or something. What's the exact wording? It doesn't forbid you from flying over people. It says you should try not to. So I don't know what the legal implication of that is, the choice of words they've used. Can you do it? Is it a recommendation or is it actually a legal requirement not to?
Well, it says you must meet specified conditions before operating aircraft over property without consent of occupier or owner. And a person may operate a remotely piloted aircraft over a private property without the consent of the occupier or owner if. So it uses the word may. So it's got must in the title, but may in the wording. Which
that seems to be very confusing.
Yeah, that is.
I bet there's many other regulations also in Europe where it's where the wording is kind of, you can take it as it is, and whatever way you read that, then that's how you see it.
Yeah, but everybody's.
How can that be?
Different.
Surely laws have got to be tongue. Surely it's got to be absolute definitions. Surely.
The thing is, when you have people, but when you have people that are, and I'm not going to be pointing fingers or naming names here, but when you have people,
must be Bruce.
And organizations and countries, and who are making decisions on assumptions, for what these drones can do, whether they are under 25 kilograms or over 25 kilograms or under 250 grams. Everything is based on assumptions. Everything is based on an assumption. There is absolutely no facts based on what they are trying to say or what you should be doing. It's all well, you can, but you should, and beware, and it's like, yeah, okay. But if you have a zone where you shouldn't be flying, you shouldn't be flying there. If this drone is of a certain weight, you shouldn't be flying it in a certain place. But everything else is kind of, it is.
So here's one for
what
here's
makes
one for
this
Richard.
more confusing, I think, is that it then says where there's a conflict between what I just said a moment ago and any other applicable law, the other law prevails. Now, how is Joe Bloggs going to know what any other applicable law actually is for it to prevail?
Yep. Richard, it says here, unless operating in a danger area, you must avoid operating over people. So does that mean you can't, or you should just try and avoid it? Is it avoiding? Is that the same as being forbidden, or what?
Do your best.
Yeah.
So you must avoid.
Yeah. It says unless operating in a danger area, avoid operating over people and over property.
Avoid, then that's not a must. It's not a may or anything. It's do your best, I think.
And then it also says down here, you must not operate above property unless prior consent has been obtained from any persons occupying that property or the property owner. So if I go to a piece of property and there's nobody there except me, I'm occupying the property. Can I give myself permission?
There must be a legal definition of occupy, though, because that's like getting rid of gypsies.
But is that you're supposed to be a lawyer to interpret this? These are rules for the public. Surely the public interpretation is overriding.
What's a temporary occupation versus a permanent one?
Yeah, if I go to the park and there's 5 people there, I say, do you mind if I fly? And they say, no problem. Have I got permission from the occupiers?
It doesn't say owner. It's an occupier.
Owner or occupiers, I think it says.
Owner or occupier. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Are you a temporary occupier?
Well, I mean, it's going to make it, surely all this weirdness is going to make it hard for anybody to be nabbed for doing anything, but it'll put the fear of anything into people before they perhaps try and go out and fly.
But that's the thing. The rules should be clear. Rules shouldn't be leaving people confused. They should be very, very clear, so that there's no room for because people should know exactly what their responsibilities are and their privileges are. So we should just have those 2 rules: don't endanger people, don't endanger property. Here's all the advisories that help you achieve that, but those are the 2 rules.
Well, the simpler it is, the easier it's going to be to not just to enforce, but to understand. Forget enforcement.
Because they've also, with this NPRM, they've also added another layer. We've got the Act of Parliament, then we've got the CAR, the aviation rules, and then we've got a transport instrument, and they refer to each other. So we've got 3 levels of regulatory definition now. And previously we only had 2. We had the Act of Parliament and the Civil Aviation Rule Set. But now there's this transport instrument underneath, which is like a policy that the regulation refers to. And if you're in violation of that policy, you breach of the regulation. It's why?
But policy is for guidance only, isn't it?
Well, it's not so much a policy, but it is another regulatory level. The
Right.
what is it? The
Like
transport
statutory
instrument. Yeah, it only has to be signed by the director of CAA, whereas the regulations have to be signed in by the minister, and the Act of Parliament has to be signed in by the Governor General. So it makes it easier for them to change the rules.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
As a
is that a
statutory
good thing or a
instrument,
bad
it's the
thing?
same over here.
Yeah.
Okay. They slide all sorts of things under a statutory instrument.
Explain statutory instrument then.
It's a lower form of regulation, Gary. So, similar to what Bruce was saying, you'll have an Act of Parliament, then you'll have regulations, and within the regulation context, statutory instruments can be formed on the back of an Act of Parliament, essentially. So it's an easier, cheaper, and quicker way of amending the regulation.
So let's say we were interested in the UK in wanting to get, we firmly believe in remote ID. So I said the word for Sparky there, because as Sparky always says, it will cure everything. Hello there, Mac, and hello to everybody that I've said hello to in the chat. Let's say that's come along and we were a little bit indecisive about it. I mean, there'd be nowhere where the CAA or anybody would back down about that. I'm not introducing this very well. I was trying to get you two involved in telling us what's been going on with the FOIAs, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. So, Ian and Richard, do you want to take it away and explain?
Yeah, I'll let Richard,
amazing stuff.
I'll let Richard jump in first to bring you up to date with the long battle with the DFT in relation to Gatwick emails being deleted.
Yeah, this has been quite an interesting journey. I really enjoyed this ride with Ian. So essentially, the latest decision that we got from the tribunal. Oh, beautiful, love your work. The latest decision we got from the tribunal was that they didn't uphold Ian's appeal of his decision against the ICO and the DFT. So they basically said that the DFT had done all they could to find the information that Ian was asking for. And in that, they were talking about the e-discovery tool that looks at Microsoft Teams, emails, SharePoint, and there's one other platform, I think, which is what was it? Got it here. OneDrive and Microsoft Teams. And so, and what was really interesting is the decision also made a finding of fact that the DFT weren't holding any information on personal storage devices, which was never offered in evidence. So what we've done the last couple of days is we're now appealing the decision of the first tier tribunal. Well, we've got to seek permission to appeal first. So we've submitted that application today, funnily enough, which we've done. And we've got a number of grounds of appeal in that, which include things like how could the tribunal make such a decision on the basis of previous case law, which looking at the scope of the request. So they've got to really go into, the tribunal should really go into looking at scope of the request, looking at all the different factors that relate to the withholding or seeking of information that a public authority has to go through. But what I also included in this one, which we didn't didn't put in the appeal before were the environmental information regulations. And under those, there's sometimes a higher bar for the public authority to carry out searches for requests for information. And I've put that in the appeal. Now, there's a chance that the judge will say, not on your Nelly, because it never formed part of the original case. But I've tried to put an argument in there to say, well, actually, the tribunal should have looked at this as an alternative with respect to making sure that the DFT and the ICO complied with the rules. So let's see what happens on that. So we looked at that. We've looked at the fact that they didn't handle information in the way they should have done and treat it with the seriousness it should have been treated with, especially given that this was a public, a whole public piece around Gatwick, really important public interest case. And what we found is that if somebody leaves the DFT, within 30 days, their deleted emails are permanently deleted from the system. So my argument was, well, if you've got all these people leaving DFT or any government department and they've deleted emails, what happens to all of that corporate knowledge? Because on the day they leave, they could just press delete on their whole inbox and all of that corporate knowledge is gone. How can you possibly conduct business on such terms? That just seems to me to be really, really odd. So we've attacked that as well. We've also gone in on what's known as Section 77, which is a criminal complaint on altering, defacing, blocking, erasing, destroying, or concealing emails. And we've also said that the tribunal didn't properly assess that, and that's really where the power is in the rules, is a Section 77, because they could be held criminally liable for that. So we talked about that as well, and also some procedural unfairness, and also providing inadequate reasons in the decision with respect to why they said, for example, why Section 77 was irrelevant. So that's where we've got to. So we've done quite a bit of work on that to see if we can get a permission to appeal, and if we do, then we're going to have another run at it, aren't we, Ian?
And we are indeed. It's interesting as well that and they'll link us in to a further chat later on in the show. But it's, for me, the concern as well is if you're deleting Gatwick information, is how the DFT is still here now in 2025, still banging on about Gatwick, the very incident that it thinks isn't important enough to keep any evidence of. To me, it just strikes me as very inconsistent.
Well,
yeah.
We're coming up against the fact that the number of years, is it 7 years? I can't remember, where they can get rid of the information as well. So if they deem to, it's something like that. But I think the thing that really annoyed me the most was the RID stuff, the other stuff, the discovery of that they're not sending information out. But I don't know how to unpack that without dropping anyone in it. So do you want to? I don't know what to say to that, other than I'm astonished that there isn't a procedure when you've been plainly allegedly lied to by them. Surely there has to be a way of saying, whoa, no, hang on, a proper, solid, simple way. As a layman, I don't understand it. They can't say, no, we haven't done that. We haven't got this because of this, this, and this. And then other people say, well, yeah, you have. Look, because we sent you this, this, and this. I don't understand how that can be.
But how is this then? Because I was seeing this to Ian the other day there. How are they, or how would they be planning to enforce remote ID when, or if and when it is introduced to the UK? When you look at the US and you look at the EU, who already have remote ID here, it hasn't been enforced. So nobody has went out and said, you have to have this, especially here in Europe. No one is saying you must have this. They're just saying it's here, please do it. And that's it. Now, I would say that where I'm working, what I'm doing, you had Lucas from Drone Tag on here a few weeks ago, about a month or so ago, and afterwards he actually sent me the Drone Tag Rider, right? So I've been using the Drone Tag Rider, and I've found it to be extremely helpful to what I'm doing, because I'm flying in places where there's lots of drones flying, and I'm having safety issues because no one knows where each drone operator is. So it's very handy to be able to have remote ID. But the thing is, it's not being enforced. Now, I'm not saying that it should be enforced. I'm just saying that where I'm flying and what I'm doing, I'm finding it really, really handy to be able to spot where people are, because I'm not wanting to go and see that person. I'm just wanting to know that they are there so I don't crash into them, because we're all doing the same type of job. So there's a risk factor here. But
it is worth adding, though.
Okay.
It's a fairly low risk factor, and if everyone's flying at VLOS.
No. Yeah, it's a different. No. I'll just say what I'm doing in the area that I'm doing it. There's about 15 drone operators who are flying in this area. Some of which 4, 5, maybe up to 6 or 7 are flying in that area a day. They're doing a flight to up to an hour. So if you have a 7-8 hour day, you've got drones flying in the same area. Now, it's a very confined area. Now, the chances of crashing are probably quite low, but still, this is a reality. We have to be careful, because there are some are flying M350s, some are flying ones a bit smaller, and of course, there's a big safety thing on there. So you don't want to have an accident, because it's going to, it's just going to create all hell. Yeah. So, but my point here is, how can they enforce remote ID if they're really forcing this on? If they're making such a big issue of this, how are they planning to enforce it?
Part of the problem here is that they're not even bothered about that. It's hopefully Gary can get it up in a minute and we can see the language. But the reason for wanting to do it is to avoid mixed signals for the public. So it's about public perception of actions the DFT's taken in the past, of rushing in legislation saying we're going to do RID by this date without thinking, maybe we should just say we're going to do it at some point in the future when we've got a proper solution. Actually doing solutions today is a very, very bad way of doing things. Actually, as well, anyone that's in the IT realm will know that if you start off with a compromise system, a bad system, just making it work for the budget system and saying, we'll sort it out down the line, you know that it never, ever properly gets sorted out. You're on weak foundations to begin with, and you just end up with something that never, ever does. Well, if you'd have just waited and got your requirements right in the first place. And as well, the in the language, the DFT is trying to give the picture that it has done this with consent, that the drone industry is behind RID, and it's not. It's the exact opposite. And they're also trying to say it's a success in America, completely missing the fact that it isn't. That New York and New Jersey both are proof positive that another Gatwick could happen with RID in place. And obviously you've got the attempted Trump assassination. So and my concern is that I've heard that the DFT rep just didn't understand the technicalities, didn't understand data protection principles, simply completely out of their depth.
If someone chooses not, if someone chooses not to broadcast remote ID, you're never going to know they're there unless you have a drone detection system, which is so. This is completely and utterly pointless in that sense.
Yeah.
But when you have, and this is why I hate the word expert. I hate the word expert when they bring in these people and they call them experts. And
you never trust an expert, do you? You never trust an expert.
Subject matter experts.
You know what I mean? It's you know that person is just getting paid 3 times as much as anyone else to just quote something from a couple of slides. Change my mind on that.
Just to jump in 1 second, just so that the audience knows. So the National Police Chiefs Council run a regular meeting. It's essentially stakeholders in the drone industry, but unfortunately, not everything that goes on there gets sort of communicated out to the communities that are represented there. So a lot of us don't actually know what's going on or discussed, which is a bit of an issue because it gives that impression everything's behind closed doors. And there's probably a lot here that could be out in the public domain and a bit more transparent, and then nobody'd lose any sleep over it. But what had basically happened is they'd invited a member of the DFT along. So if you have a look, Gary, there, this is just the freedom of information, but there's another attachment there, which is the documents themselves.
The response, that's what I was looking for. Yeah. Okay, so, all right, I'll go away and try harder.
Yeah. So what I'd asked for was the email exchange. If you do show our attachments there, Gary, do show all.
There we go.
So it's that one and one below. So we have the email from the DFT. Try and do the other one where it's the download, Gary, so you get the proper PDF. It's prettier to look at. Prettier for the eyes. Oh yeah, we'll come back to that one. Go and open up the other. This will be interesting afterwards. So zoom in. So this is interesting. So first off, we have the DFT, and we'll have to scroll down a little in a minute. But basically, it's saying, I'm from the DFT. I'm head of future flight and aviation skills in the DFT. And then it goes on and it tries to present the case that, look at that, a full consultation as was undertaken. Well, any consultation the CAA has had with the industry has said you can get your rid and you can stick it up your backside, which is not captured there at all. But we have mentioned the infamous Gatwick incident. So if you look there, Gary, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs down, last sentence, you'll see Gatwick at the end there. Yeah, there we go. So we can see yet again. So this is 2 months ago. So in 2025. So people, again, they go, why you keep banging on about Gatwick? That's the past. If only the DFT would accept it was the past and accept that it was a mistake and just be open and honest, I wouldn't have to keep banging on about it. But we go further down and somewhere, we don't want to scroll too far because we'll end up going past it, I think. But there is the acknowledgement somewhere in this email that they're basically going to go ahead with... Basically, what they were saying was, if the government will give us the money to do the system properly, and even then I debate whether we're doing the right thing and the costings are right and so on. But putting up parking all that for a moment, here we are, given the uncertainty of funding. I've heard, but I've only heard it from one source, so I can't say this is 100% fact. We'll have to see. But I'm told they haven't been given the money. And what they're saying is, if we're not given the money, we're going to go ahead with essentially a system that isn't going to work. It's going to be an unfit for purpose. Just do the direct remote ID, and at some point in future we will fix it. These are the famous words in IT that you'll hear that mean it will never ever be done properly. So that's where we are now. So obviously this is all happening, and if you're here in the UK, has anyone been telling you all this? Probably not. And this is the problem, that this is all going on. And all this narrative of we've all said, yay, give us way. No, we haven't. Oh, and obviously we all know this is easy to spoof. In fact, I was just chatting to somebody today that says they've put together a little device. I think it's like, something really tiny, and it will put drones wherever you want. It will even do them in like legitimate looking flight paths and all that lot. So it's an incredibly easy system to defeat, which will mean it will make airport closures far easier if that airport isn't going to have counter drone system there. So it's going to make a Gatwick more likely rather than less likely.
And when every time, because if you, dear viewers, if you look on the channel, I made a video a couple of years doing exactly that, and I put the drones all around Tokoroa, and you can put them in formation, so you can sit here and you can do that. It's ridiculously simple. But then what I was going to say is the counter drone people then jump on your head saying, no, our systems will be able to detect that. We will know. And I say, my ass. If you have enough of those out there, they'll take a lot of time working out what the spoof tracks are. And all you need is a few seconds. And actually, to refer to the current incident in the UK, all you need is an e-moped or an e-scooter and a pair of wire cutters to get into an airbase and attack aircraft. So here we are worrying about all this. And what happens? Some people go into an airbase with some wire cutters and spray paint aircraft. And high horse, stand by, I'm on my high horse. But to a certain point, Ian and I, when we're looking around airfields for where we're looking for sensors and looking for stuff, and we're driving around in Google Earth, you could plan everything sat at home. You could work it. You could work out fine detail from open source available information and maps, and go there with a pure and clear plan without having never set foot near the place. That would be your trigger, isn't it, with all those cameras, is it start seeing vehicles and all that sort of thing. So a high horse, and perhaps we are absolutely worrying in some ways about the wrong thing.
But look at, if I could just said it before, it's being missed, this physical security. All the money and panic goes around drones, and then we don't even often do the right solutions, as we're seeing here. And you're thinking, well, if you want to have a bit of a panic, you want to spend some money, focus on the RAF bases and army bases and so on, and give, let's progress the kit we're already working on, the very fancy RF swarm defenses, the laser systems and that. Get all that nailed down, put in the places where you'll stop one of the Ukraine type attacks that we saw against Russia. And then everyone could sleep peacefully at night.
Gary, coming back to the RID stuff, only this time last year did the US Government Accountability Office conduct an audit on RID. And they found that law enforcement agencies lack the tools, they lack the training, and they lack data sharing agreements to make operational use of RID. And they basically, in the report, it's 33 pages for a bit of light reading, warn that any integration plans are at risk until those gaps are closed. So we still have the same structural issues here in the UK with respect to policing. So the CAA's claim that it will materially help policing is absolute nonsense. And I think that, when we look at RID and how it's supposed to be manifested within itself, and on that report that you was speaking about, Ian, I've spoken to a few people around the whole privacy risks that relate to RID, and from what I can see, there's been no proper assessment around data protection compliance, because the pilot themselves are coordinating their personal data. And it's telling whoever it is who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. I don't believe that a proper data protection impact assessment has been carried out by the DFT or the CAA to justify in the first instance why this is absolutely necessary.
Look, Grey Arrows in the comments actually made that point. Well done, Grey Arrows. Yeah, well done. You were there and you made that point. Yeah.
You want to have a look at the other attachment, Gary, because not to embarrass Grey Arrows too much, but the then their organisation isn't redacted on one of the emails back, but they actually did ask the DFT why they were bringing up Gatwick in 2025, and I don't believe, looking at what's being provided, they even got a response. So if you want to just open up that attachment for the
let's go. That was the first one, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, so you'll just need to zoom in a bit.
Was it this one?
We can all give a salute and say thank you
to the grey arrows.
Yes.
Thank you, Grey Arrow. There we are. Look, Grey Arrows. All right, I better go down. Pass their details quickly. Yeah, there we are.
He's running away, I think.
Has he gone? Is he gone? Yeah, it's actually, where did you want me to go in that one? Was that just that?
To the very, very, very top.
Okay.
See, it absolutely beggars belief that Gatwick is still being referenced in 2025, and I think that's a view we would all echo.
No, so thank you, Grey Arrows. Well done, well done, well done, all the way from Wigan. Yeah, it blows my mind. Now, explain the intricacies of what they said they weren't doing, but they were doing. That part of this piece.
Well, without the money, they won't be doing the network remote ID, which itself has some legitimate concerns that need to be, honestly and openly discussed with the drone industry and sorted out, which has never been the case. But saying that aside, so we're looking at the normal direct remote ID, which we know is inferior on range to Aeroscope anyway. So we're paying for a duplicate inferior system, which to me is absolutely bonkers for value for money for the taxpayer in the first place. But the DFT seem oblivious to the fact of even considering the pilot's location, whether that's going out, the privacy implications of that, and so on. I'm slightly concerned in that, and you might want to have a double check over it later, Gary, but I got the impression that ARPAS, and this is shame on them for this, were playing down the risk to pilots and experiences from the attitude of the public. They were trying to say, the public are all pro for drones now. No, that's not the fucking case. Sorry for swearing. But there was a story.
That's in vogue, that word today.
There was a story only a couple of weeks ago with a guy at a park where the council were misusing the bylaws to stop him flying. And he just casually, no drama, says he was recently punched in the face by a member of the public. And that's what it's got to, that people are accepting abuse as a normal part of flying drones. And so people's experiences are actually varied. And no organisation should be playing that down. In fact, they should be going to the larger members and saying, because I know people have even changed the habits, where they're not getting conflict. It's specifically because they're choosing to go out to that field that's miles away from a residential area, away from people, so you don't get into that in the first place. And all that needs capturing. And if you were doing this honestly and with integrity, that's the kind of thing you'd be doing. First, you'd be saying, actually, is there a risk? As all that negativity that we've been pushing out and doing the clearly biased impact study with Balpa back in the day, with pushing the Gatwick narrative repeatedly, someone needs to actually understand what they have done over the years, accept some responsibility for that, and say, actually, no, we have put out a negative picture. And how about actually putting out a positive picture for a few years first before you start sending out people's bleeding locations and saying that's fine and dandy and we believe there isn't an issue. There is. Sorry, I had to rant there because it just annoys me when people are not only not acknowledging an issue's there, but are trying to downplay it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Broadcast RID will expose a pilot's live location to probably any smartphone around, right? So what does that mean in terms of being exploited for intimidation purposes? You could be a completely lawful operator going about your business. I'm working with one at the moment who uses drones purely for journalistic purposes, and is facing some heat because of that. And all that broadcasting the is going to do is potentially expose that person more so for just doing their day job, right? And there's a risk there. And I would like to know, how can that risk be guarded against to protect people who are legitimate, lawful operators going about their business?
But I mean, that question should have been asked hard in America, and you know, we've got a live example of how a system works and potentially what happens. And we know in America people are being sought out, and you might be sought out. I mean, imagine your large DJI Agras, expensive, whatever it is, your big kit is well worth just coming to knock you on the head to take the kit away.
Who has been? Who? I mean, do we have evidence of people that have been sought out purely from their own, let's say, broadcast? I mean, I've heard, yes, there has been this, but I've never seen hard evidence of this person was sought out because this person had an app and this is how they located them and this person was assaulted and stuff. I haven't seen.
I'll hunt someone down. Just
but hearing and actual what has actually happened as an actual, let's say, offence, there's two different things. You know, there's hearsay. You know,
there was one. There was definitely one.
Regulators are happy to regulate against potential risk. So why can't we use potential risk as a position?
I mean, we can say all day long it's a genuine potential risk. Not
everything's a potential risk.
This is a far higher.
You can, you know, there's more chance of you getting shot in the US. There's more chance of idiots. And I think that half of the negativity that's happening in the UK right now is because of the press. There's a lot of negativity, through drones that are just like, drones are blamed for everything in a sense. So the actual negativity is there. That doesn't help. And so yes, of course, RID, we know it's not perfect. There are risks there. I haven't seen actual offences. But of course, when you have the media that don't help, then of course, then you're going to have problems.
I guess what I'm getting at is we're in a world. This was what was being mentioned, that it is comedic when you look at it. We're in a world where the drone industry is judged on every risk, no matter how slim, and we've always got to consider it. And yet we've got a risk that isn't in any way, shape, or form slim. It isn't slim that a NIMBY will attack a drone pilot. We've seen it plenty of times. So it isn't a slim chance someone would use an app if it's there. It's also not a slim chance that somebody would use it for robbery, because when you actually look at actual crimes that people commit to rob, a post office, for example, or even in America, banks these days, the bank robbery amount you get, I think it's under $2,000. It's actually quite low. So when you start thinking there's people, willing to get a gun and end up doing a lot of prison time for a relatively small amount of money, and then you think what a laptop would cost, and a tablet, and the phone, and the new fancy DJI power pack and your DJI mics and everything else that you could get away with, it then becomes a lot more tempting. And the only mitigation that is good in that is the fact that DJI is now making it harder, so that if gear is stolen, it's going to become increasingly harder to reactivate and use that. So that has to be said is a good thing, but that wouldn't mitigate these kind of problems. So in a world where nobody's being killed by a drone, the likelihood gets slimmer all the time because drones are getting lighter and lighter and safer. Yet we're quite happy that somebody could, get assaulted or potentially murdered for their kit, and that doesn't matter. It just annoys me that this whole narrative around.
I mean, we do go out to get opinion, right? We do go out to get opinion, or the CAA does, right? And then in their CAP 3105 document, where they asked about remote ID, 85.9% of respondents viewed the proposal as disproportionate due to potential costs of the solution, right? And they also question the benefits of remote ID, mitigating security risks, question the scale and severity of the security risk posed by UAS. So that was in the report. But what followed, which for me is quite alarming, is that following the consultation, a couple of paragraphs later, the CAA, the DFT, the Home Office of Police maintain the view that the ability to identify UAS operators will be essential to enforcing UAS regulations and deterring unlawful UAS operations. Remote ID is considered a proportionate measure given the scale of potential risk UAS may present and the low impact of remote ID to lawful UAS operators. So on the one hand, they've gone out and got a public consultation which said 85.9% of us don't want it. And then they've said, no, we need it.
I think the legal position is we have.
But again, how are they going to enforce this? How are they going to put it in? Right.
Nobody will enforce it. That's the problem with what initially.
There's not enough people in the CAA. There's only the CAA. There's not, you don't have
the CAA that do the enforcement. It's the police that have to do it.
Okay. You think the police are going to do this?
I don't think they are.
Absolutely clueless. They are clueless.
Yeah.
I want to think as well, when we think about that 85%, keep in mind this is 85% after the Home Office had specifically put in guilt-tripping statistics to suggest drones were very, very dangerous and that RID was needed. So there was actual attempts at manipulating the outcome and the swaying towards RID. And even with that, they've got such a pushback. So I think that's especially interesting, the fact that you've tried to pull those guilt strings, which has been an ongoing tactic going back, at least a couple of consultations. And one thing that's what annoys people, and they don't want to engage so much now because they're like, and this shows it again, that their consultation was never about getting our opinion about RID and respecting it. It was they were just hoping that people will go, give us RID, and they can go, woo, we've done it for you. And it's just gone against them. They've got the reality, but they were going to do it anyway.
Archie Pilot, royalty in the chat. Royalty in the chat. Evening, Tridge.
The way that they have introduced remote ID in Europe was, it was rolled out very, very quietly. It was mentioned, it was in documents, but there was no faff, there was no fluff, there was no fanfare, there was no, there was no consultation, there was no, and then when it came out, it was actually there was more noise from the community to say, how do I actually put it in here? Because there was no instructions, there was nothing to say this is what you should do. I made a video on how to do it, and my video got lots of views because of that, and that was the only thing that people had to work on. But at the same time, I was talking with the regulators here in Finland, and I was saying, what are you doing to check that people are doing it? And they weren't doing anything. And I said, why? And they said, because we've got enough to do. We don't have the resources. We don't have the ability, and quite honestly, we don't care.
But isn't the point? But okay, all right. So it didn't. You're saying people aren't going to enforce it, but isn't the drama the fact that they're trying to bring something in with this sort of claimed, and sort of what Trish has shown that RID has achieved any of the goals claimed for the system? There are huge claims for it. It's going to make the sky safer. It's going to make everyone be able to fly BVLOS. It'll even make your breakfast, and it'll find you a girlfriend. I mean, all the claims that they have for it. Why? But why? And it doesn't.
I wonder who said that.
Well,
New York, New Jersey. That's all you're going to say.
Yes,
New York,
New Jersey, and the Trumpington all are actual proof in a very short period of time. Relatively, the system has been a complete and total failure. And then to add to that, you've got the FAA getting ashore that are now on their third cycle of counter drone testing, proving. So they're moving towards what we do in the UK of having counter drone systems that are sufficient around facilities. So they're actually realizing that RID isn't the solution. I think they'll even be thinking about, let's scrap the idea and move towards a network rig or something.
They'll go straight to network, won't they? Yeah.
But the interesting thing here as well is we have seen from the report that was done without pilots even knowing this was going on, but data was being scraped around the US from drone pilots for a task that was given to ashore, and they monitored flights for 11 months, and all that data has gone out into the public domain. So it's private companies are mopping up that data and doing stuff with it without people's consent.
I think
that creates a problem. That problem again of what we've talked about privacy.
And that's sort of thing. Actually, another issue. I've been using this drone tag rider, and when I see drones flying here next to my office, I'll put this thing on. I go and I'll just have a look. 9 times out of 10, no one's broadcasting remote ID. The only people that broadcast remote ID are the enterprise users. That's it, right? And that's the ones that you want to have, because, like, so what I'm flying, I'm now flying at 3 Microsoft sites. I'm flying at a TikTok site. I'm flying at a Google site, where the lower airspace is really, really congested, right? There's like there's drones flying all the time. This has been really handy for me. This has been handy. We also have WhatsApp groups in order to actually notify every drone operator who's flying at those sites, in order to make sure that we all know who's flying, so that we can give each other space. But there are people who don't care, and they're flying. This helps. I get to see them flying. And by the way, there's a little bug. There's a small bug in the remote ID system. If they are flying a DJI Mavic Enterprise, Mavic 3 Enterprise, or Mavic 3 Enterprise Thermal, and they're using RTK, it doesn't show up. It only shows that there's a drone in the area, but it doesn't show where that drone is. If you're using RTK, when they take off RTK, boom, then you can see
many years ago, I flew an Inspire 1 with Mark, actually, at a live airfield, and we stuck a FLARM on the back of each Inspire because there were other FLARM operators around on that airfield, and that worked an absolute treat for those that were coming into land, because we were flying on the periphery of the airfield.
Yeah.
But I think that was one of the first times that I'm aware of where electronic conspicuity has been attached to a drone. I mean, this was a good few years ago now, where visual detection and existing EC, electronic conspicuity, actually worked and dominated avoidance. Are we in the realms of actually making this more complicated than it needs to be, given that visual detection works? It works for manned as well as unmanned aviation, and the existing electronic conspicuity devices that we've got. I mean, using the FLARM there on a live airfield when we were testing certain things worked a treat, and there were no issues.
To be honest, with drones, you can have them avoid, as you say, from the vision, and also you could have local communication where drones just chat to each other, say where they are, and they could all avoid each other. But the thing with that is, there's no money in it for anyone. So that's why we've never done that, and no one will ever consider it. But you could actually, deal with these. If you were saying it's, about safety, you could deal with it that way. In Sparky's comment in the chat, he was mentioning how the argument's always made. Well, if you assume that everyone that's conspicuous is a good guy, and then the unconspicuous are bad guys, that's how you do it. You can already do that now with the aeroscope. You can, because basically everyone's flying DJI. And this is good as well. The one good thing we got out of the secret ripping of everyone's data in the US was it proved that most of the drones in the sky are DJI.
That's right.
So no one could debate it now because it's actually been recorded. So over 80, I think it was over 85%, which funnily enough fits in with the figure. Well, it was over 85% of the people in the sky or thereabouts were flying DJI, and in the US you will get more of a mixture. than you would in the UK, because obviously you've got Skydio and the likes being used over there where you don't hear. So we already know that the aeroscope we've got is basically doing the job. So you would actually have less view of the sky because the lesser range.
And unpack the weather they were flying in as well, Ian.
Oh yes, this is brilliant as well. So this sort of undermines all the narrative about Gatwick and Lake and Heath and so on. The data found that drone pilots don't fly in bad weather or at night. So
Really?
basically said people fly on nice days and on the weekend, and definitely in the daytime. So having scanned the whole of the US, there were like very few people are ever flying, especially after midnight.
See these experts. I'm telling you, they're just, you know.
Well, the great thing about Ashore is they are getting hard data, one way or another, whatever it is, and it's the only group out there that's doing that. So they're doing fantastic work. Of course, how their findings are reported, well, that's a different kettle of ball games altogether, isn't it? And you can report stuff however you want and distort it.
Hard data is no match for an expert, though.
No, it's not. It's very, very true. Very, very true. No more DJI. The shelves are empty. Sparky's saying that, and also earlier on, Johnny was saying he's having trouble getting goggles in America as well. But maybe we'll close out this topic because we've just gone just over the hour. But and then we'll see what's happening in America.
There is another freedom of information in that chat above, which is a slightly separate topic, which we could just go on to next briefly.
All right, I'll head off there. But what I wanted to say to this is that remote ID doesn't fit into existing aviation safety systems as much like having ADSB and stuff like that does. So why are we doing something that isn't natively in established systems? And Stephen, it sounds like really you don't need that RID detection device. You need a drone detection device that's more broad based. If you find it really useful, then you need probably an aeroscope in your pocket. Is probably what you really need.
Yeah, but I think the aeroscope isn't it now discontinued? They don't make it anymore.
No, they did that for a while, but it's continued on. They brought out a dongle and gave it to all the legit users for free to keep it going. And they sell the install one still. So they stopped the suitcase one. I don't know if they've changed the thing on that, but they definitely stopped selling that. And they've got the install so you can put it in airports of that. I think they were sort of moving away, thinking, well, this RID, we don't need this now. But as not the whole world is on RID, there's still a market for them to have it there, and I think there might still be a market, as we know that RID isn't all it's cracked up to be. So maybe it will still stay in existence for quite some time. We shall see. I mean, it's obviously making plenty of money for them.
Yeah, brilliant.
Was it this
problem, and then you create the solution and sell them both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, was it that one you're after, Ian?
Yes. Oh, yes. I don't know. We wanted to mention this last week, actually, because it has got a really big piece of information in here as well as question one, but it was more question two I wanted to mention. You'll want to zoom in on this. Obviously, we've been chatting over the various weeks, all started back in November with the Lake and Heath and how there was a drone that had come into, that was obviously harassing the bases and then coming to close contact with the helicopter there. Well, it turns out now that having gone through this entire airprox process, for months believed that there was a drone there, it's come out that the video recorded is inconclusive and they don't know what's been recorded. So we've got it there that the video, it's no longer a drone. It's now, there's an object caught on camera. So until we see the video, we really don't quite know what's going on. And I feel question two I'd asked, and if we scroll down, I can't really make out what it's saying. I think, and this is quite dodgy actually, that's gone on, not for this, but the follow-on. This response came back the night before the airprox was supposed to be published in the morning. So I think this was put together quite quickly. So I couldn't quite make out what's going on with this second paragraph, but I think it was probably because it was late in the day and they thought we better get this out in time for the morning. And what's actually happened is, mysteriously, the air prox has not been published, which can only mean aliens as one thing, obviously.
Aliens.
Or it means that the pilot has withdrawn it and said, oh, wait, no, there wasn't an air prox, and it goes away. Or the MOD have been naughty and just pulled it. And what I find quite interesting with this is, and I've not seen this happen before, normally if you do a freedom of information to the air prox board, the air prox board actually goes to an RAF facility, but the CAA are the public face for that. So normally the CAA will hop on it and they will reply to you. So they're kind of like an interface. So they'll message the RAF guys who then reply back, and it's as though he's speaking to the CAA. What the CAA have done to someone today is said, ask the air prox board. So they've directed them, just we're not even, don't ask us. So I think they were asking, well, where's the air prox gone? Why has it not been published? And suddenly now no one wants to say, that, certainly not the CAA, which suggests this might have been a unilateral action by the MOD. Well, I guess we'll find out, but that is slightly sinister for an air prox just to seemingly vanish. And given on freedom of information, it has more or less been promised already for this month. So they've used an exemption with freedom of information, which is future publication, but that is still subject to the public interest test. And given it was taken in good faith that it'd be published this month, that hasn't been pursued. But if it's not the case, that will go to the ICO and saying, look, that this exemption is now being abused because you're saying future publication, and then you're doing all you can,
knocking it down the road.
But all I can make out from this, and I've said, look, I realise you might be under pressure. Could you elaborate on it? But now they're saying this drone type thing was 5 miles south of Newmarket. But the wording is kind of trying to suggest people are panicking now. You see, it's row back, row back, row back, row back, row back. It's no longer a drone, and going. It's no longer a pursuit. It wasn't being chased after all. It was just. It's just funny how this thing has changed so much. So now it's like, oh no, we were nowhere near it, Governor. There was no safety issue. But
with Richard here, with stories changing like this, at what point can we just? Is it the modern world? We can just make stuff up and keep going along. And there's no consequences for it. At what point can you say, "Well, hang on, Judge, why don't you, or a grown up, have a look at this properly, and demand an actual answer to this"? How do we get to that point? How can we do that?
If it went to the ICO, you would get movements in that direction, and certainly if you went to tribunal, that would definitely happen. But none of this would, and I'm sure Richard agree on this, and none of this would play well at tribunal. There are so many points of attack on this of saying this. It is so fundamentally unprofessional.
I think, Gary, if you say something 3 times, then it's the truth.
Oh, well, there we are. I said something like that at work yesterday. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Talking of, excuse me, from Ian's point, testing it with the ICO and using the government's own mechanisms through a tribunal is certainly one way to get to the truth. We've also looked previously at judicial review. We did that last year where we challenged the CAA's statements in their annual report regarding the size of the drone industry and then saying that they based their scheme of charges on it, and then subsequently retracting that forced them to actually make a correction slip, as they call it, to Parliament on the basis that those accounts were wrong. So, judicial review procedure is another way of holding the government to account. And you have to go through a pre-action process before you take them to court and have a full hearing. But quite often, that pre-action process can work quite well, because the whole point of it is to get a settled position between both sides. And if you say to them, look, this clearly is wrong based upon this evidence, you need to retract it, and they refuse to do that, that's not going to help them if it goes to court and is heard as a judicial review hearing, certainly from a cost perspective. And question mark on RID. What do we do about that? Given that we've got reports out there that talk about RID and how ineffective it's been. Given that in the US, we've seen, as by way of a leading example, how ineffective it's been from an enforcement perspective. Given that the CAA have conducted a public consultation and 85.9% of people have said that this is disproportionate in terms of costs and everything else, why are we still proceeding with it? I think, from that perspective, challenging them on that point could also be useful.
But it's just as a layman, again, it just strikes me as nuts. And then when do you get to the point of proving that it's endemic in the system? The system is rotten. I'm not sure. I'm not putting the word right. That's not the correct words. But it's built into the public body to just to lie and alter stuff. And how do you get that changed? Because we're only looking at one or two things in our little world that we know about. There must be many similar things where they're kicking it to the curb and bending the truth.
That's why we have a judicial review process now, because of historical incidents, I would imagine, where the government can be challenged. But that's it's one of a few mechanisms that a layman has in order to challenge government omissions as well as their commission and decisions. So it's being strategic, really, in one's approach, I think, in tackling that uncertainty and that position that the government holds dear to their heart at that time. For whatever reason it could be. I mean, it could be anything.
Is that a class action lawsuit sort of thing, or is that does that not make sense? It's not a legal thing.
So in the US, it's class action. In the UK, it's a group litigation order, and you have to establish a significant loss, I think, in order to get a GLO, group litigation order, and you have to go to the court to get permission to form one first. You can't just set one up and run with it. You've got to go to court, and so that's quite a process, and that there's a time and costs attached to that, and that so it's not always appropriate.
And of course, we're just supposing that it's caused damage to the industry. It would be perhaps hard for us to have enough evidence. I don't know. I'm just making this up on the fly. I
mean, we can definitely say it has, and the very fact the tribunal, first tier tribunal, in one of the Gatwick cases, specifically noted that it had quite useful. But having said that, it's difficult to put it down to a cost and a harm for individuals. These things are difficult to argue, I imagine, and more so when you're against a public body. We seem to be in the world in the UK, when a private sector company does anything wrong, a ton of bricks falls down on their head, and then they're properly dealt with, they're fined and everything. And the public sector does it, and it's, no, let's let them off. It was an accident. They won't do it again, and then they do it again.
Ian, you're going to love this. So I picked up on a report from Nezumi Networks looking at drone telemetry for RID. And they've got in here this very quick paragraph. RID standards and regulations aim to increase safety and security for both drone operators and airspace operations. One or more unauthorized drones entering the airspace of an airport, we're coming to it, military base, or other critical infrastructure facility could result in huge economic and/or physical damage. For example, Gatwick Airport experienced an instance in 2018 where 2 drones flying near the airport forced authorities to divert approximately 1,000 flights, affecting around 140,000 passengers with a loss of £800,000. No.
And did you notice? I'm sorry, I'm jumping on you, Richard. But did you notice? Did you watch the airspace closure last night around Dubai and all that? They closed it, and a load of aircraft started orbiting, and about 20 minutes later, they opened it again. That was a bloody rocket attack, and they shut the airspace down for like an hour and a half or something like that in total, and then and everyone held. Yeah, it was just insane. There we are. He's in the comments. I think anyone in the comments is appearing in our comments against sanity and things like that. I mean, that's known. Our dear viewers are maybe not of sound mind, but yeah.
This is where all my clients come, Gary.
Yeah.
The sad thing with all of this is Gatwick is
what
always.
Was that? Sorry, Ian, I didn't see that. Something went past you.
Beautiful.
That's better. Thank you very much.
I keep saying there's an update. It's nearly finished on that, actually.
Yeah,
update's coming up.
The sad thing with, as it's highlighted here, is Gatwick being brought up time and again, and it's always to sell some snake oil, usually. And it's funny how
I'm
people
writing to these report providers now, asking them for their evidence.
Yeah, the good thing with this isn't it funny how they can Google the Gatwick thing, they can Google the cost, and they managed to Google past Samira Shackle's report and all the freedom of informations that pop up and all the stories that say how the narrative has fallen apart. They, funnily enough, managed to scroll past those, which I think that takes real effort. It's almost like it's deliberate.
Yeah.
How many times has PricewaterhouseCoopers mentioned Gatwick over the years?
Oh, bloody hell. God, don't you give them both into
I'm just wanting more experts, So
yeah, God, they've probably done. They've actually, to be fair, they've probably done as much damage to the industry as Gatwick have. They've done terrible damage to the industry, predicting all manner of things that just are never going to happen. No, they've done terrible damage. There's a few other
by their predictions over the past 4 to 5 or 5 or 6 years ago, I should be a billionaire by now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait a minute, you mean you're not?
Yeah, we know he is. We know he is. We know he lives in a bunker deep in underground in Finland with a cat and everything. We know that. We know that.
I've seen it.
Yeah, the whole lot, and submarines and everything, and a big swimming pool with sharks in it, and a bit of glass that swings across and gets out of the way. We know that. We know that.
But you're all invited. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going one up on Richard. Here's my new book.
Oh, there's your new book. that would be a good book. That would be a very good book. Very good. I wanted to, but I won't. Let's not discuss prize anymore. Yeah, it's that I'm amazed they can still get away with this. They must be feeling the heat. There are other things that we're not going to talk about because we know that our friends at various places do get up in the morning and watch this. So the stories.
Sorry.
Go on,
just on the, we've been talking about experts, or some people have. So I've just emailed the contact us form at Nizumi on their report asking for evidence. And you'll love this. One of our experts will be in touch with him.
There you go. Well, that's perfect. It's just
I wrote 25,000 word dissertation on my master's in law on expert witnesses, and so I'm very careful who I call an expert. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah.
And do you have any other similar works of fiction we can buy?
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant note to end this on. Richard, thank you very much for coming and joining us. Dear viewers, wherever you are in the world, even Chris Crockford, look after yourselves, and we'll see you again next week at 2100 the Gin and Tonic. Hopefully the world's a bit more settled place this time next week. Wherever you are in the world, be careful out there, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.